All right, so I bet you're thinking, I want to get better at understanding English, like when people are talking.
Yeah.
And guess what? We've got this awesome guide here. It's got tons of tips and tricks to help you understand spoken English better.
It's really interesting. A lot of people think there's like a quick fix to get fluent,
Right.
but this guide, it's all about consistent practice,
Yeah.
even if you can only spare like 15 or 30 minutes a day.
Which, speaking of habits, I used to listen to Spanish music every single morning when I was getting ready.
Oh, wow.
And it really helped me tune my ear to the language.
That's a fantastic idea.
And way more fun than flashcards, let me tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. This guide, it also suggests things like podcasts,
Uh-huh.
especially ESL Pod. That's a good one for beginners.
Okay.
Music with lyrics, that's another great way to learn, or even just, YouTube videos.
Right.
There's so much out there.
Tons of content.
The key is really choosing something that you're actually going to enjoy, something that'll keep you coming back for more.
Okay, so I know that a lot of people, probably everybody, loves subtitles.
Yeah.
They can be a lifesaver when you're watching something in English,
Oh, absolutely.
but this guide suggests being a little bit more strategic about using them. What are your thoughts?
It's true. Subtitles can be super helpful at first,
Mm-hmm.
but they can also kind of become a crutch.
Yeah.
You might find yourself reading the subtitles instead of actually listening.
It's like using GPS all the time.
Yeah,
You'll never learn how to actually read a map.
exactly. So one of the strategies they suggest is listening to the same thing multiple times.
Okay.
The first time, just try to get the main idea. Don't worry about understanding every single word.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like on the second or third listen, you can really focus on specific words and phrases.
Gotcha.
Another suggestion is to gradually reduce your reliance on subtitles. So you might start with English subtitles,
Mm-hmm.
then switch to your native language subtitles, and eventually try going completely subtitle-free.
That's a good goal.
Yeah.
Another big challenge, I think, for people learning English is how fast native speakers talk.
Right.
It can sound like they're rapping sometimes.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because you think about it. When you learn your first language, it was a really gradual process.
Mm-hmm.
This guide really emphasizes patience.
Right?
You didn't just suddenly start understanding really complex sentences.
Definitely not reciting Shakespeare at age 2.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this guide recommends adjusting the playback speed. You can do that on YouTube or other platforms.
Okay.
Or look for, content that's specifically designed for English learners, like they have slow English dialogues and things like that.
Now let's talk about vocabulary, because I always say that vocabulary is like the building blocks of understanding.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
The more words you know, the easier it is to understand what you're hewing.
know?
It's like you have a bigger toolbox and you
Yeah.
can build more complex things.
So what tips does this guide give us for, expanding our vocabulary toolbox?
Well, they say active note-taking is really essential. So whenever you come across a new word or phrase, jot it down.
Okay.
Don't just let those words kind of sit in your notebook. Put them into practice. Use them in sentences.
Mm-hmm.
Make flashcards.
Gotcha.
You could even use an app like Anki.
Okay, cool.
It also recommends focusing on everyday topics,
Like what?
like food or travel or shopping.
Yeah.
Things that you'll actually use in regular conversations.
Because knowing the word for quantum physics isn't going to help you order a coffee.
Exactly.
Now, here's something I've always found fascinating. English accents. It's like a whole world of different sounds.
It is fascinating how English has so many different accents and dialects. It makes the language so rich.
I know. Sometimes I admit I feel like I need subtitles even just to understand like a really thick Scottish accent.
Well, they do recommend immersing yourself in a variety of accents. So, for example, watch the news from different countries. Pay attention to how characters speak in movies and TV shows.
It's about training your ear to recognize those subtle differences,
Exactly.
like learning to identify different bird songs.
Yes. And there are dedicated resources like BBC Learning English and VOA Learning English that offer content specifically for learners in various accents.
Okay, so next up is active listening. And I'm curious, what's the difference between just hearing something and actively listening?
That's a really important point. It's the difference between letting information wash over you and truly engaging with it. So when you actively listen, you're thinking critically, you're making connections, you're asking yourself questions.
So it's kind of like the difference between like watching TV while scrolling on your phone and actually paying attention to what's happening on the screen.
Precisely. And one technique the guide suggests is called shadowing.
Okay.
This is where you listen to a speaker and try to repeat what they're saying at the same time.
Oh, yeah, I've tried that. It's like a vocal workout.
It is, and it's great for pronunciation and intonation.
Uh-huh.
They also recommend taking notes while you're listening. Just jot down key points or phrases that stand out to you.
Right.
That helps you stay focused.
Yeah, it's so easy to zone out when you're passively listening.
Exactly.
Taking notes kind of forces you to pay attention.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions as you listen, like you're having a conversation with the speaker in your head.
I like that.
Don't just passively accept everything you hear.
Mm-hmm.
Question it, analyze it, think for yourself.
Speaking of being critical, this next tip from the guide involves a bit of self-assessment.
Okay.
Recording yourself speaking English and then listening back.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly, I used to find this terrifying.
It can be intimidating.
Yeah, but it has helped me so much.
Yeah. They suggest choosing, like a short passage or a conversation, repeating it aloud and recording yourself.
Okay.
And then listen back to your recording and compare it to the original.
And it's amazing what you pick up on when you actually hear yourself from an outside perspective.
It is.
Sometimes I'm like, wait, do I really sound like that?
It's not about vanity, though. It's about identifying those areas where you might need a little more practice,
Right.
whether it's pronunciation, intonation, or just the overall flow of your speech.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of daily practice and active listening, but honestly, learning a language shouldn't feel like a chore.
No, it shouldn't.
This guide has some really interesting points about making it more fun.
Absolutely. It really emphasizes the idea of tapping into your passions.
Mm,
Let those fuel your English learning journey.
okay.
So, for instance, if you're really into science, watch documentaries.
Hmm.
If you love fashion or food, check out some vlogs.
Yeah.
If you're a movie buff, challenge yourself with short films.
I do love documentaries.
There you go.
Maybe I should add more of those to my English practice.
It's about finding that sweet spot where
Mhm.
learning and enjoyment meet. It turns language learning from an obligation into an adventure.
And remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
This guide is full of tips for staying motivated on that long journey to English fluency.
It's so important to be patient with yourself.
Yeah.
There are going to be days where you feel like you're making amazing progress.
Mm,
And then there will be days where you feel stuck.
right.
It's all part of the process.
Kind of like when you're figuring out a tough level in a video game.
Exactly.
You might get frustrated at first, but the satisfaction of finally beating it makes it all worth it.
Totally. So the guide actually highlights celebrating those small victories,
Okay.
even the little ones.
Yeah.
Like, let's say you finally understand a whole movie without subtitles.
Awesome.
That deserves a high five.
Definitely.
Did you navigate a conversation in English smoothly?
Yeah.
That's a win. Those small victories, no matter how tiny they seem, they really fuel your motivation.
They're like those little checkpoints along the way,
Yeah,
reminding you how far you've come.
exactly. They also recommend keeping things fresh,
Okay.
incorporating variety into your learning.
Mm-hmm.
Experiment with different types of content,
Like what?
different accents, genres.
So don't be afraid to mix things up.
Yeah, it's like a playlist for your ears.
I like that.
Keep those tracks fresh and exciting.
Yeah.
And they also talk about setting small, achievable goals instead of getting overwhelmed by this big, giant goal of fluency.
Right.
It's that classic divide and conquer strategy.
Break it down.
Yeah. So maybe for this week, your goal is to learn 5 new words and actually use them in conversations.
Small steps lead to big results, right?
Exactly. All right, let's talk about that last tip in this section. Community.
Okay.
Learning a language, it really doesn't have to be a solitary pursuit.
Yeah.
Humans are social creatures,
Mm.
and connecting with others can be so beneficial.
So it's like having a support system on your language learning journey.
Exactly. Surrounding yourself with other learners can provide a lot of motivation and support.
Yeah.
You can share your successes. You can even commiserate over your struggles.
Right.
And of course, learn from each other's experiences.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders on the sidelines, rooting for you every step of the way.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And the guide suggests exploring online groups and language exchange platforms.
Okay.
That way you can connect with people from all over the world.
It's like a global language learning party.
Exactly.
Ah.
And sometimes just sharing your experiences, the good and the bad, with others who understand what you're going through,
Yeah.
it can make a world of difference.
It makes you feel less alone.
Yeah.
So you've taken that sense of isolation and turned it into like a shared purpose.
Beautifully said.
So I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
From the importance of daily habits to the magic of active listening, from exploring accents to finding your language learning tribe.
It's a lot to think about.
I know, this guide is packed with advice, but we're not done yet.
Not even close. So welcome back. I'm excited to keep going with this awesome guide on how to get better at understanding English.
Me too, and we just left off talking about how helpful it is to have like other people to learn with, a community.
Right. Exactly.
And it's so nice to know that we're not alone in trying to, level up our English.
Absolutely.
But this guide, it's got even more to offer than just moral support. There are so many practical tips in here.
Totally. It gives us some really creative ways to make practicing our listening, well, more active, more engaging. One that really stood out to me was using music.
Ooh, yeah.
To help you understand better.
Music is so powerful, it can get stuck in your head whether you want it to or not.
Oh, yeah. The guide suggests, pick some English songs that you really enjoy.
Okay.
Listen to them a few times and see if you can pick out words and phrases.
It's like a fun puzzle for your ears.
Exactly. Yeah. You can even use the lyrics to follow along and, check if you got it right.
I remember when I was learning Spanish, I would try to sing along to my favorite songs, even if I didn't understand all the words.
That's a fantastic strategy.
It really helped me get a sense of, the rhythm of the language and the pronunciation.
And it highlights another point the guide makes.
What's that?
Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
I mean, you're learning a language.
Yeah.
It's all about, trying things out and seeing what happens.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of mistakes, I think we've all been there where we think we're saying something perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
And then a native speaker looks at us with a totally blank expression.
Oh, absolutely. It can be a little humbling, but it's a great way to learn.
For sure. The guide actually recommends embracing those moments.
Really?
Yeah, those, what did you say? Moments?
Don't shy away from them.
Yeah. It encourages us to, see them as stepping stones to fluency.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah. So instead of, cringing or feeling embarrassed when we mess up,
Yeah.
we should use those moments to ask for clarification, right?
Yeah.
And learn from our mistakes.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's like, if you're learning to play basketball, you're not going to be afraid to ask your coach for tips.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And asking questions, that's a crucial part of being an active listener.
It is.
Right. Don't be afraid to ask a native speaker to repeat themselves or explain a word or phrase or even just slow down a little.
Yeah, it's okay to ask for help.
Totally. And remember, everyone learns at their own pace.
Absolutely.
This guide really emphasizes patience. It's okay if you don't understand everything perfectly right away. You're not expected to.
Sometimes I think I get a little impatient with myself.
Really?
Yeah, I'm like, why am I still struggling with this?
Oh, yeah. Me too. Any advice from the guide on how to deal with that frustration?
Well, they talk about focusing on the small wins. Let's say you understood a whole conversation in English.
Wow.
Without needing anyone to clarify anything. That's huge.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about those small wins.
Right.
Because we're so focused on this big goal of fluency,
Oh, right, exactly.
It's like we're so busy trying to reach the top of the mountain, we forget to enjoy the view along the way.
That's a really beautiful way to put it. And those little wins, they're like little bursts of energy to keep you going.
Motivation boosters. Okay, let's switch gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about another challenge that I think a lot of English learners run into, accents.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many different accents out there.
Absolutely. The guide acknowledges how overwhelming it can be.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the benefits of welcoming that diversity.
So instead of being intimidated by all the different accents, we should think of them as chances to get better at understanding.
Exactly.
Bring it on.
Think of each accent as a new code to crack.
I like that.
Pay attention to the sounds, the rhythm, the intonation.
So training your ear to hear the subtle differences between, say, a British accent and an American accent.
Right, exactly.
Kind of like how you can tell the difference between the sound of a piano and a violin.
That's a great way to think about it. And the guide, it gives us some fun ideas to practice this.
Oh, cool. Like what?
Watch movies or TV shows from different countries.
Okay.
You can also listen to podcasts with hosts from different places.
Okay.
Or even YouTube videos where people are talking about their regional accents.
That sounds a lot more entertaining than just drilling pronunciation rules.
It is.
Speaking of pronunciation, I think a lot of people get kind of hung up on trying to sound exactly like a native speaker.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.